Yeah. Thank you for coming. You know, I put a, and I think Raheem Kassam has just put it up. The first statement I think I made from Danbury was about 4 weeks ago, September 26th. I said, victory is at hand. That you could see the collapse of this kind of phony campaign by Kamala Harris, the politics of joy, right? And she had nothing to back it up whatsoever. And you could see the beginning in the polls start to come our way. I'm very proud that the War Room has had President Trump's back, and it particularly has been the platform for the grassroots movement to have their voice heard. And I said at that time that with the hard work of the Get Out the Vote effort and the election integrity effort, that we were on the cusp of having an incredible victory that could actually be a potential landslide. Now we come to today, and I'm finally out of being a political prisoner by the Merrick Garland, Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi regime. Okay, for standing up for my political beliefs against an illegitimate committee in the House that did not have a ranking member and did not have minority counsel. I went to a federal prison for 4 months. Now, Nancy Pelosi and Kamala Harris and Merrick Garland thought they were going to do two things. Number one, they were going to shut down the War Room and not have that as a voice for the grassroots movement of MAGA in this country. And number two, break me. Well, I think you can see today I am far from broken. I've been empowered by my 4 months at Danbury Federal Prison. Why was it empowered? Because I was able to listen, to observe, and to learn from working class minorities, young African American men and Hispanic men, and yes, Puerto Rican men, about what their lives are and what the queen of mass incarcerations, which is what they believe that Kamala Harris is. She refuses, and she has refused as border czar, to commence any mass deportations of illegal alien or illegal migrant criminals in this country. And today, President Trump with the angel moms actually had to say, we need to set up a form of restitution to reimburse these folks. Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, as the border czar, has refused to do that and continue on the mass incarcerations. Now, President Trump, and quite frankly, with the visionary leadership at the time of Jared Kushner, President Trump came with the most significant prison reform bill ever created, the First Step Act. And today, 6 years after, and 4 years into the Biden regime, of which Biden in 2020 promised and committed to dramatically decrease the number of incarcerations in federal prisons, and nothing has been done. Nothing has been done. You know, this is criminal negligence by the highest, at the highest levels of BOP, Bureau of Prisons, and the Justice Department. You have particularly minorities, African Americans and Hispanic men and their families being broken, rotting in federal prisons, when the First Step Act is very clear of what's supposed to happen, and all they do is get spun and spun and spun. The system is broken. Bureau of Prisons is broken. This is not about Danbury and not about the individual. I have many good individuals working at Danbury Federal Prison. The system of the BOP, the system of the Justice Department is broken. They have weaponized the Justice Department against a political movement, a conservative grassroots movement that's had President Trump's back, and from the dark days of February, March, and April of 2021 is on the cusp of the biggest political comeback in the history of this nation, led by grassroots people, everyday Americans, including, as we know now from the polling, and the reason I said we're on the cusp of a massive victory, she is failing to connect with minority men, Hispanic and African American men. Now, why is that? They understand what the scam is. They understand that this administration purposely let in millions of illegal alien migrants, illegal aliens, to drive down labor costs. The Federal Reserve said it from the very beginning. We're going to drive down labor inflation by getting more unskilled workers here and putting pressure on the lowest skilled sector we have. And they were successful, and they brag about being successful. The minority community understands that. They understand the scam and the con of what Kamala Harris has done. In addition, she has failed to do, for political reasons, the reason the First Step Act is not implemented among minorities is because Kamala Harris and Merrick Garland and Joe Biden in the White House and Nancy Pelosi understand it to be a massive political win for President Trump. And that's why they're failing to do it. They thought they would shut down the war room and take our power away. The show is bigger and more powerful than it's ever been. And please, it's not a podcast. We take the live streaming television show every day and the radio show, and we turn it into a podcast. So my brothers and sisters at CNN, when you say the podcast number is off slightly, right? It hasn't. We were the largest podcast, but we're streaming. We stream on television, and we play on radio and online. And Nancy Pelosi thought a federal prison was going to break me. Well, it empowered me. It empowered me. I am more empowered today, more focused today, sharper today, in better shape today than I've ever been in my entire life. So Nancy Pelosi, suck on that. The desperation of Kamala Harris and her campaign is obvious. They went from the politics of joy, and we were the first ones to call it, to darkness and night falls on America, and they pivoted hard. You know why? Her incoherent explanation for what the politics of joy is befuddled everybody. So she had to go back to the same playbook. Trump's a fascist. His followers are not deplorables, they're fascist. That they're a danger to the country. Well, you know who doesn't buy this? Working class people don't buy it. And particularly African American and Hispanic men do not buy it. I had a great opportunity at Danbury, and I want to thank the Education Department of Danbury Correctional Institution for allowing me to teach, yes, civics and government. I had, I think, close to 100 students in 3 different classes. The majority, particularly the later classes, were minority men, African American, Hispanic. Lots of Puerto Ricans, lots of Dominican folks in the Dominican Republic. And if you had a chance to read Vanity Fair, the cover story on our populist nationalist beliefs, you can see that it talks about economics. And it talks about the way the system works, the financial system in this country, how it's inextricably linked to the political system. And you can't understand what's going on until you understand how the economy, how the Federal Reserve, how deficits, how they play into the politics of the day. That much that you see on television is just professional wrestling when it comes to politics, and is not the thing itself. And I can report to you that these young men, most of whom are nonviolent drug offenders that have, quite frankly, a lot of years in prison, these people came to this with a new awakening, and that is the awakening the American people are going through. The system is not only broken, the system is rigged against the working class of this nation. And I saw at Danbury that we're going to move past the politics of race with an intermediate stop in the politics of gender, which is being forced on everybody right now. We're going to get to what is important, and that's the politics of money. And once we get to the politics of money, there's going to be some fundamental changes in this country. I want to thank you folks for coming. I'm far from broken, and I appreciate you guys attending. And I will tell you, if President Trump's grassroots forces combine as we can combine right now, you're going to see unbelievable numbers next Tuesday. However, the Democrats are not going to give up. They just hired Mark Elias. And you only hire Mark Elias, who I think is the toughest election lawyer in the country. You only hire Mark Elias when you want to go to the mattresses. They understand they can't beat us at the ballot box. We're going to have a reprise of 2020, where they're going to try to do everything humanly possible to nullify Trump's election and delegitimize his second term. And I can tell you right now that the working class people in this country, the middle class people in this country that support Donald John Trump are not going to let that happen. I'll take some questions.
Okay, so please introduce yourself before asking your question.
Hey, Steve. Good to see you. Tim Miller.
Tim Miller.
From the Bulwark. I was listening to your Not a Podcast this morning.
Do you have the pukas on today, or we have the pearls?
I'm clear. No
pukas or pearls? No pukas or pearls?
No pearls or pukas today. Sorry.
This is Tim Miller, one of my favorite guys from MSNBC in the Bulwark. Used to be the spokesman for the Republic. When I met Tim as a younger man, he was the spokesman for the RNC, the old RNC, the establishment RNC, the RNC of Mitt Romney, not the RNC of Donald Trump. But go ahead, Tim. Question.
Trip has been, Steve. You said on your Not a Podcast today that the fight will continue from November 5th to Inauguration Day.
Yes. With
January 6th being a key part of that.
Yes.
So are you planning an encore from the last
year? No, Jamie Raskin. I think, Tim, what you ought to focus on is Jamie Raskin. Jamie Raskin saying right now, if they take the House by one seat, that they will go back to their committee report and they will say President Trump's an insurrectionist, that Bannon went to prison, Navarro went to prison, President Trump's been indicted, and they will sit there and go, hey, the Supreme Court may have issued a 9-0 opinion about him being on the ballot, but it doesn't mean we have to sit him as president. This is what they're thinking up right now. Nancy Pelosi gave an interview to Rolling Stone magazine. She said her number one priority is to make sure that Donald Trump is not only not elected, a re-elected president of the United States, but he never sets foot in the White House. Nancy Pelosi and Jamie Raskin right now are thinking about, and they're very open about it, of not certifying a Trump victory on November 5th. And that's not me saying, that's Jamie Raskin saying it.
Kamala Harris victory. What are your plans for after November 5th if it's a Kamala Harris victory, the ballot box?
We're going to make sure that Kamala Harris doesn't win on November 5th. Yeah. We're highly confident. We've seen the polls. You've seen the numbers coming in. We're going to, look, we believe in the American system of democracy. We believe that, and the reason we like democracy, we're winning. Right, and we're going to win on November 5th.
So I do just wonder then if
you do agree with me on Jamie Raskin that Jamie Raskin's already said they're not going to certify President Trump.
I don't agree with that. I do wonder though. You were teaching civics. You're out of prison. I wonder if you're a reformed. Looking back on the last January 6th and the fact that you incited a mob that ended up.
Hang on. If you look at what we said, is that as the states requested, 7 states requested, never got to. A full review. This is because Vice President Pence didn't handle it correctly. This is because Vice President Pence did not handle it correctly. No, absolutely no change. For the simple reason is that we should have had a review as requested by the states for all 7 states at that time. Okay. Tim, thank you very much.
One question at a time. Okay.
But Tim, if you want to continue to make speeches, it's good television.
Since you got out of prison? I got one more.
I don't want to talk about personal conversations, but we've had a chat.
You have talked with former President Trump this morning?
We've had a chat.
Have you talked about Election Day coming up?
I don't want to discuss what we're talking about, but by the way, he watches the show. He saw the show this morning. The show this morning didn't talk about my time in prison. What it talked about was 2 things. Number one, a massive grassroots effort that's underway that has to culminate on November 5th, particularly in places like Pennsylvania. It looks like max 15% of Republicans will have voted on the mail-in ballot early voting. Before then, we have to deliver 85% of the people to the polls next Tuesday. He understands that we are the focus and back of people like the Elon Musk of the world and the money he's putting in for his effort, and Charlie Kirk and other independent groups out there that are putting in, that we're driving and lightening the grassroots movement of the Trump MAGA movement to show up next week. That's number one. And number two, we had Bill McGinley and Mike Davis and others on to talk about the election integrity, the efforts that they're making, and quite frankly, places like Pennsylvania, that looks like the election administration is a little bit of a dumpster fire right now.
4 years ago, you urged then-President Trump to declare victory on election night when you knew all well that there was going to be a decent chance that we would not know the ballots had yet to be counted.
Hang on.
You went out and did exactly that. Have you urged him to do this?
Hang on for a second. When I said that 4 years ago, it was, why did I say that? Why did I say that? Because a guy named Mark Elias came up with a report that two individuals, Bill McGinley and Raheem Kassam, helped deconstruct in July of 2020, and he walked through how the Democrat Party was going to steal the election with illegitimate mail-in ballots. He said
illegitimate ballots. They were mail ballots that American voters cast.
I totally. By the way, we can argue. We can adjudicate that. Hang on. We can argue that. President Trump came up at 2:30 in the morning and talked. He should have done it at 11 o'clock at night in 2020. Okay? I am urging President Trump, if the votes come in like it looks like they're going to come in, he should step up and inform the American citizens of exactly what's going on and not keep people in the dark like was done in 2020. So President Trump should step up and walk people through state by state of where these leads are and how these leads came about. We're not prepared. We're not prepared to have in the dark of night all the problems that happened last time. Okay, the 2020 election was stolen. Okay, I will never back off that.
And we know that you wanted him to stay on as president. We know that you wanted the election.
I didn't want that. What I wanted was the will of the American people at the ballot box to be effectuated. I want the will of the American people at the ballot box to be effectuated. That's what I wanted.
Steve,
yes, sir.
Road Steamer here. I'm wondering when's the next insurrection, and can we storm the Burger King after this? Like, can we do that? I mean, doesn't he look great now? We were in Danbury the first month together. He looks great. You don't remember me? We were lifting weights and stuff in the weight room. When's the next insurrection? How are we going to do this and stuff, man? You know what? If I'm leaving, I'm having a good time. He looks like Yoda with AIDS right now. Robbie Road, Stephen, no political violence, people.
Yes, sir.
Like
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Mr. Bannon, in 2023, you called Elon Musk a running dog for the greatest enemy in China that America has ever had. You called him a war profiteer who's sleeping with the enemy, and a globalist who would take a check from Adolf Hitler himself. I want to know whether you stand by all that today.
Elon Musk, as you know, Tulsi Gabbard was a Democrat. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was a Democrat. Elon Musk was a very progressive Democrat. They've all become awakened by the MAGA movement. Today, I think he's one of the strongest supporters of the MAGA movement. He's gone through a awakening that I think very few have come. I totally disagree with many of his positions, particularly about the Chinese Communist Party and others. But as an American, he has done, I think, something very smart, and that is put money in back of grassroots organizations and people to do something simple. And that's, and that's to get out the vote here in the 2024 election.
So you don't mind someone who would take a check from Adolf Hitler as long as it's Donald Trump?
No, what I said is he's gone through a great awakening, right? And I think if you talk to him, he has gone through a great awakening. And I think part of that awakening is understand the power of the MAGA movement and the power of grassroots America. Thanks. Yes, sir.
Please identify yourself when you ask the question.
Tim Fasciola with Politico. I'm not sure if you saw, but the mayor got indicted while you were away, and there have been members of his legal team who say that his best bet is for a Trump presidency to succeed, and then Trump to pardon the mayor.
So I'll repeat the question so people can hear it. So this is a question about Eric Adams and about he thinks about Trump's. I have no earthly idea about Eric. Well, not about. I see what Eric Adams has been charged with, but I don't think. I think it's. I have no earthly idea about that, and all I know is President Trump thinks that New York City, this metropolitan area, is in deep trouble, right? Rising crime. The streets are filthy. I think President Trump has not been a supporter of things doing with Eric Adams, Mayor Adams' administration. So I don't know. You should ask President Trump that.
Steve,
yes, sir.
From New York Magazine. What are you going to do over the next? You've got 6 days. You're out now. You've got 6 days between now and the election. Maybe some period afterwards in which this will be still at stake. What are you going to be doing during those days besides the war room?
Well, there's a lot of different options. I'm of a strong belief right now. This is New York Magazine asking what myself and War Room is going to do. Obviously, with 7 days or 6 days left, you have to have a convergence of the get out the vote effort. I am not a huge believer in our ability to actually participate in rallies or do rallies, because right now I think President Trump does that great, and he has people along that are going to do rallies in the different states. Our focus is one thing: to make sure that we get as many American citizens either early voting while they can or to the polls next Tuesday. And so our efforts are how to scale that effort like we did today on the show and other efforts behind the scenes. So our thing is to make sure that we're there to scale the vote of get at the vote operations, and also on the election integrity. Today we had Bill McGinley, one of the senior lawyers, on there, and he's still calling for volunteers. I think there's been 200,000 election integrity volunteers. We need to get people in the counting rooms. We need to get people around the tables to do ballot curing. Okay, so there's still need for that, so we're going to call for that. So our efforts are on the election integrity efforts to where we can be supportive and then get out the vote. Yes, sir.
Peter Harrell on the CBC News. If the election is declared in favor of Vice President Kamala Harris, what exactly do you believe former President Donald Trump should do in the following 2 months? Will you unequivocally condemn political violence?
Wait, hang on. Who believes in political violence? That's a loaded question. Of course people don't believe in political violence. I was just a political prisoner of a regime that put somebody in prison for what has been a civil charge throughout the history of the country. I think, I've been told I'm the only misdemeanor that's ever been at Danbury Prison. I think I'm the only misdemeanor. They told me when I was on trial in federal court in D.C. that I'm the first misdemeanor at a federal level. You know, CNN reported that wrong that day. I'm not guilty of a felony. That was a misdemeanor. So, listen, we have to go through this election. And whoever wins the election wins the election. Okay? I think we can show we're pretty powerful in opposition, right? So if whoever wins, wins. But I can tell you right now, it's not Trump that's hiring Mark Elias. It's not Trump's going to the mattresses about election integrity right now. It is Kamala Harris's campaign. And why is she doing that? Because the politics of joy was an epic fail. Now, why was it an epic fail? Because she couldn't take the narrative and actually put together a coherent set of policies that people could understand. And so she's pivoted. She's pivoted worse than Hillary Clinton. She doesn't call people deplorable. She calls them fascist. This rhetoric is dangerous. It's dangerous, and all they're doing is ratcheting it up. And you're going to see the working class people in this country, the middle class people in this country, that are in back of the greatest political comeback in American political history, are going to say, whoever wins this election wins this election. Yes, sir.
My name is Joe the Box. I'm with the America First Warehouse, part of Real America Voice. 1,392 days have been since Ashley Babbitt was shot and murdered at the Capitol. 820 days, Mickey Wickoff, Nicole Rappert sit outside the gulag next to the...
Can we get a question?
The question is this,
Okay.
sir.
Yes,
what
sir.
can we tell them? Because now, 315 in jail, 314 today. What can we tell them to expect?
Here's what I think. If you look downrange for a second of President Trump's second term, that commences on January 20th. Look at what's going to happen. Number one, the debt ceiling. We hit the debt ceiling almost immediately. Number two, you have the expiration of President Trump's tax cuts. Number three, the government runs out of money December 20th. It looks like it's not going to be an omnibus. President Trump has to deal with a massive fiscal crisis, okay, economic and fiscal crisis. In addition, you need to start to do what Kamala Harris failed to do. That's the reason that African-American men and Hispanic men are not voting for her and staying away, is that you have to begin the mass deportations of illegal alien criminals. That is in the first couple of weeks of his second term. There are many things that have to happen and many investigations that should take place under the proper the proper structure, apparatuses, and to be adjudicated. And that's going to take time. So I think it's not helpful to tell people this is all going to be done immediately. You have the House, you have the Judiciary Committee, you have the Inspector General's report that hasn't been released in the Attorney General's office. They also, I think, ought to have another J6 committee just like they had before. But this time, the Democrats should have a ranking member and they should have minority counsel. So all documents go to the minority counsel, all witnesses go to the minority counsel, people are cross-examined, and we do it in the right way. But I don't think that that's going to happen right out of the box because we have such huge financial, well, the reality is we have huge financial and sovereignty issues about what's happened to the borders of this country and what's happening to internally in this country. This is why Hispanics are almost at 50-50 with President Trump. This is why African-American men and Hispanic men are not voting for the politics of joy. They see their lives right now are not about the politics of joy. They're about a brutal reality in this country. So I think we have to be very upfront with people of what's facing us and what President Trump and his administration are going to face. And to the degree that we get to those investigations, which we will, it has to be done over time, it has to be done properly, and it has to be done so that the American people see that this was not partisan, that this is not to send Peter Navarro to prison or not to not indict President Trump or former president 92 times. Okay? Or not to send a guy like Steve Bannon that disagrees with you politically to prison. It has to be done in the right way. Yes, ma'am.
You call yourself a political prisoner? If so, why do you think that you were released then a week before the election? Also, we're in New York. Trump just had a rally at MSG. You said you spent time with Puerto Rican men while in prison. Do you think that those comments by the comedians that spoke before Trump, were they racist and should Trump condemn them?
Can I take the first part of your question first, which is why was I released 7 days before? I think the math works out if you take 120 days from July 1st till today. That's what my sentence was. Remember, the Bureau of Prisons said last week, the Bureau of Prison admitted I was eligible for part of the First Step Act. I should have been out on September 19th, according to the law of the First Step Act. Now, I'm just there on a misdemeanor for 4 months. You have individuals that have been there that are rotting years after their release date, that today don't know the release date for their families. This is destroying families. The First Step Act is not an executive order. The First Step Act is not just some sort of concept. It is a law. And the Justice Department and the Bureau of Prisons are, by criminal negligence, not implementing that law. And they're not implementing that law for one reason. Because to implement it the way it's supposed to be implemented is a massive political victory for President Trump, who's the only individual in this country that stepped up and had true prison reform. And this is one of the reasons that African-American families and Hispanic families think so highly of him. And this is one of the reasons that the queen of mass incarcerations, which is Kamala Harris, is not. Let's talk about the Puerto Rican situation. Why is President Trump, why is Florida no longer a battleground state? One of the reasons and significant reasons is the Puerto Rican support of President Trump and his policies. The Puerto Rican people in this country, American citizens, support President Trump and support his policies. Okay? So that some influencer or comedian says something, is it inappropriate? It's definitely inappropriate. Is that the policies of Donald Trump? Absolutely not. If you look at 218 and 219, why is he resonating with Hispanic families almost 50-50? Why with African American men? Because the economic policies of President Trump had blue-collar workers getting higher increases than white-collar workers, non-college graduates getting higher wage increases than college graduates in 218 and 219, with almost zero interest rates and almost zero inflation. Okay, that made more money in their pocket. They understand the economic times were better then. This is one of the reasons that the politics of joy didn't work. And when she pivoted to this dark night in America, it's not working either. They support President Trump, and he's going to get historic numbers. Now, what the comedian said, the influencer said, is clearly inappropriate. Okay, but that's not President Trump's policies. President Trump is bringing working-class people together. And I can tell you what I saw at Danbury. We're going to move past race. And we're going to get to the discussion about money in this country and who the elites are in this country and who controls this country. Okay? And that is when you're going to see a broad base, even broader base today, populist movement. But thank you. Yes, yes.
I heard what you said about
Who?
Jen Peltz from the Associated Press.
Hey, Jen
What you
Peltz.
said about focusing on get out the vote and election integrity, but has former President Trump asked you to campaign with him, and are you going to do that?
Like I said, my focus is on victory next Tuesday at the biggest number possible, because folks don't think it ends on Tuesday. You don't hire Mark Elias to go to the mattresses if you think it's going to end on Tuesday. This is going to take a while to sort through. Okay, and you can see by the election administration problems in Pennsylvania. You see what they're talking about in Maricopa County already, about how long it's going to take to count the votes, right? This is going to go on. So it's most important for President Trump and his followers to make sure that we put up the maximum number possible. And one of the things I don't like, even hearing, is people talking about roles in the administration, or people talking about, oh, let's go try to win the popular vote, or people talking about, oh, we're overconfident. There's a lot of confidence. We should run now like we're 20 points behind and run hard. And that's all my focus is. The way that we can scale that on the war room is what I do. Like I said, President Trump's going to do the rallies. His rallies are spectacular. To me, it's walking precincts. It's working phone banks. It's going door to door. It's sending text messages. Yes, ma'am.
Washington Post. What, if anything, has former President Trump asked of you to do behind the scenes in the next week and following that?
I don't want to talk about that, but President Trump, look, back in 2021, when some of the Republican establishment abandoned President Trump, the MAGA movement started to actually get about organization, the precinct strategy, and other things like that become organizing principles for him. Right now, the thing that is most important for President Trump and his movement is to have his followers come together in an organized effort, right, to get out as many votes as absolutely possible. And that's the focus in the final 6 days. Remember, normally Thursday before the Tuesday election is when, you get news stories, you get everything. So we have to have people motivated. We have to have people going door to door. All this polling and people talking about, oh, well, Trump always polls 3 points less, that's all theoretical. What we know is that what happens next Tuesday is fact. And the only thing that matters is votes that can be certified from American citizens. And that's what we're focused on. Yes, ma'am.
High likelihood of recidivism right now, Steve, I have to say.
Do you have a message?
Well, first, as a political person, no. It's so from Tim Miller's own lips, a high degree of recidivism. No, because Kamala Harris, the Biden regime, Merrick Garland, Nancy Pelosi weaponized the justice system in this country against their political opponents. And so if that continues on, right, you may see that. If that continues on, but like I said, I am proud that I went as a political prisoner to Danbury Prison. I served my country on a Navy destroyer in my 20s, and I served my country in a federal prison in my 70s. If you're not prepared to be thrown in prison by this weaponized Justice Department, then you're not prepared to stand up and fight for your country. And I will never back down from that. So thank you, Tim. Yes, ma'am.
This is, do you have a message for Europe?
Wall Street Journal. A message for Europe is that, President Trump's been a great friend of NATO to make sure the NATO alliance is actually funded by countries in Europe. I would say that the populist nationalist movement over there that's on the march is on the rise, should look at what's happening in the United States of America, particularly against the elites in this country, and how with very little money, every day we're building. Like I said, we're going to move past race here. You're going to see historic numbers, I think, of African American and Hispanic men that do not vote for a Democratic candidate. So we can move past these things that have held us back in the past and get to the sunlit uplands of talking about power and control and money.
Steve, I have a follow-up.
Yes, ma'am.
Mediaset, Italian television, largest broadcaster in Europe. Follow-up is, why is then Europe looking at these elections as if they were their own, and why are they so afraid of a Donald Trump?
I'm not sure Europeans are so afraid, but that European elites are so afraid. There's a big difference. There's a big difference. Number one, the European elites, the elites and the wealthy in Europe have not paid their fair share. Right? Listen, our defense budget's almost $1 trillion a year. A lot of that goes into NATO and supporting allies throughout the world. That we need our allies to pitch in, particularly the wealthy allies in Europe. Europe does not carry its weight on its defense. And if the Europeans are so concerned about Putin and KGB and the Russians, they're going to have to step up to the plate and be even a bigger part. And President Trump, and Stoltenberg said this, there wouldn't be a NATO today if it was not for President Trump and what President Trump did in assisting NATO to actually start to pay more of its fair share. The European elites, of course they hate Trump because they understand President Trump is a populist nationalist. They understand about what he's talking about is trade. They understand what he's talking about tariffs. They understand he puts American citizens first and he puts American citizens' economic benefit first. So if I was an elite in Europe, yeah, I would be quite concerned about Donald Trump because, number one, it's going to inspire populist movements throughout Europe to actually get off the dime and start winning elections and winning them big. Yes, sir.
Scott with CBS. Can you clarify what you're telling my colleague? What would you encourage Mr. Trump to say on election night before the states are all projected?
When I say the states are all projected, it doesn't make this about the states projected. President Trump, to me,
not declare victory.
Hang on, should go before the American people. Go before the American people, and I thought he should do it last year in 2020 at 11 o'clock at night, not at 2:30 in the morning, and explain to American people where the voting is, right? Where the voting is and what's to come, what is still outstanding. The American people, quite frankly, were quite confused in 2020. They don't need to be confused today. And I think you're going to see some big numbers from President Trump. We've already know that, though, that Pennsylvania and Maricopa County and others are saying it could take a while, but he needs to explain to the American people early on exactly where we are in the voting.
Like analysis?
So it seems like you're suggesting that Americans should be ready for this to potentially take a few days to know who the winner is.
I don't say that. I believe that Jocelyn Benson in Michigan has said it's going to take a couple of days for Michigan. I believe that people in Maricopa County just said the other day it could take them 4, 5, or 6 days to figure things out. Not just
because 4 years ago on election night, you wanted Donald Trump to declare victory. So
well, hang on. Well, we have made significant changes, and mail-in ballots are not what they were. He told us, Mark Elias told us, that on election night you were going to call it what is the red mirage. But just wait 2 weeks when all votes are counted. He didn't say all legitimate votes. He didn't say all certifiable votes. He didn't say all votes from American citizens. He said all votes. Wait till all the votes are counted. And you can only count certifiable chain of custody votes from American citizens. Okay, so we don't want to have a replay of 2020. Changes have been made. I don't think enough changes have been made, but it's election officials in Pennsylvania, it's election officials in Maricopa County, it's election officials in Michigan that are saying right now, and I think some of those election officials are Democrats, some are Republicans, that they don't think that this is going to be, that they don't think they're going to be able to give definitive numbers for a couple of days. But it doesn't mean President Trump can't go out there and explain to people exactly where this is, and I strongly advocate that he does. Yes, sir.
Questions because we have to do a show.
Yes, sir.
Mark Halpern with Two-Way.
Hey, Mark Halpern, how you doing?
Appraise the strengths of the Harris campaign, and if you would, just take through the Battleground states and say how you see each one of them.
I think the Harris campaign, and I believe this comes from the anti-democratic forces inside the Democratic Party. In shifting out when President Biden was taken off in 10 days off the ballot, it seemed to me at the time that they should have some sort of mini primary so that people like Governor Pritzker and Whitmer and Newsom and Shapiro, whoever else, wanted to jump in here and actually make the case in some sort of period of time up until the convention, could actually go and make a case of what they stand for. She started with this incoherent politics of joy. And she understands that you can't, she wasn't getting traction on this. And that's why she pivoted. She needed to take 1 or 2 at most topics like President Trump's Make America Great Again, or President Trump secure the border, or President Trump's bring jobs back from China. Take one or two things that resonate with this country and working class people and drive it every day. You haven't seen that. That's why now she's talking about people being fascists and people being this. I think right now, President Trump, just like in 16, right, we have a chance to win the states we won in 16, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, if the grassroots delivers. And I think maybe even throw in Nevada, which we didn't win in 16. I think President Trump could get up to over 300 electoral votes if people are focused today. And I think the Harris campaign it's not focused, and it's particularly not focused on issues that are obviously at the highest levels of the American people. So I think if the job of the grassroots is done, and this is why I'm not sure it's important for me to go to a rally with President Trump or go to a rally with other people, but to do the work that you need to have done to make sure those votes get out there so that there's no question, even if some things happen on ballot counting over, that we have gotten big enough margins that the votes that were remaining were bigger. We have bigger margins than the votes outstanding remaining.
I asked you about her strengths, and you just listed weaknesses. Does her campaign have any strengths? No.
I think, you know, for people that align with progressive values, right, I think Vice President Harris has spoken to those values. I don't think she did it in a way that could broaden out to a general election, but clearly she's Vice President of the United States. She's been a U.S. Senator, right? She clearly has strengths. She's proven that in the past. I don't think she's done it in this regard. And I think some of her strengths, you know, particularly in areas that she should have been in, like in sitting in the Situation Room and knowing this, when Brett Baer asked her a week ago, what is the #1 geopolitical threat to the United States? What is the United States' #1 competitor on the world stage? And she instantaneously said Iran. And Brett Baer tried to help her, and he says, we know some people say China. Hint, hint. She says, oh, no, Iran. If you say that Iran is the #1, a regional power is the #1 threat to the United States of America, given what the Chinese Communist Party, which is a mortal enemy, not the Chinese people and not the nation of China, but the Chinese Communist Party, a mortal enemy of the United States. If you sit there and want to be commander-in-chief and you say the #1 threat when you have a chance to back off and say it's Iran, you're not ready to be commander-in-chief. And clearly you haven't learned anything or anything important in your 4 years as vice president sitting in the Situation Room. Anybody? Yes, ma'am.
Conservative TV station in Europe.
Yes.
I got a question regarding the European issues. The conservatives in Europe view Donald Trump's potential presidency as a whole. I would like to have your comment on that, and I would like you to emphasize on the role of the American Polish voters in this mission.
Well, remember, you have conservatives and then you have populists and you have nationalists. I think the populist nationalist wing of those conservative parties. I don't think some of the classic conservatives, just like here in the United States, I think there's elements of the Republican Party that don't see President Trump as an answer. They vehemently disagree with us on tariffs. They vehemently disagree with us on things like the U.S. Steel takeover by Nippon Steel, things that a guy like Fetterman would back, right? So I think some of the classic conservatives don't see President Trump as somebody that represents a policy portfolio that would interest them. But I do think that the populists in those countries do, and I do think the populist nationalists specifically do.
Polish voters?
Okay, we've got time for about one more question.
Okay, thank you. I'm so glad you're out. So speaking of the money of politics, New York City spends about...
What organization?
Writer Human Events.
Okay.
So speaking about the money of politics, New York City spends about $5 billion on illegal aliens. Do you think that was part of the reason why Madison Square Garden, which has 19,500 seats, had over 200,000 people clamoring to get in, and New Yorkers decked out in MAGA gear? Do you think it's a swing state like Vivek Ramaswamy says in 2024?
I think that you saw that when President Trump went to the Bronx, right? Remember, the elites in this country, the reason there are 10 or 15 million illegal alien migrants or illegal alien here in the United States, the Federal Reserve said this. And now the Congressional Budget Office is saying it, that they had to break the back of inflation, they had to drive down. They focused on wage inflation. And where did they focus on wage inflation? They didn't focus on the investment bankers, and they didn't focus on the lawyers, and they didn't focus on the fat cats in Silicon Valley. They focused on unskilled labor here in the United States, and they were open about it. The Federal Reserve couldn't be more open about it. And that's what happened. Okay? Number one. Number two, they tell you now, well, you can't possibly deport anybody, that the GDP has 1% growth because you have another 10 million consumers. The people that are being destroyed by the 10 to 15 million illegal alien migrants are the working class African Americans and Hispanics who are voting for Donald Trump. These people are very smart, and they see their lived experience every day, whether it's in New York City or throughout other major cities in this country and other states, that their lived experience is worse. And their lived experience is worse because of policies of the powerful, the wealthy, and the strong. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. Thanks. Appreciate you.
Thanks, everyone. If everybody could get